This story begins when David gets his first real paycheck. It's a Friday night in early summer, the kind of evening that smells like new beginnings and city dust. The moment the notification pops up on his phone, salary received, $3,200 something shifts in him. He exhales, leans back on his worn-out couch and smiles to himself. For the first time in his life, he feels like he's made it. The city outside hums with energy, neon signs flickering, cars rushing by, laughter spilling from bars. And in that light, with the glow of his phone still reflecting on his face, David makes a quiet promise to himself. I've worked hard. I deserve this. So he spends a new phone top of the line, dinner at that trendy sushi place he's seen on Instagram, a jacket that makes him feel important, and drinks for his friends, because being generous makes him feel rich, even if it empties his wallet a little faster. By the end of the weekend, the paycheck that had once looked so big now sits at a fragile balance of barely enough. But David tells himself that next month will be different. It never is. You've probably met someone like David before. Maybe you are David, or maybe you've been him once. He's not reckless. He's not dumb. He's just human living in a world that teaches us that the value of money lies in what we can buy, not what we can build. Across the office from him sits Ellie, quiet, precise, and invisible in the best way. She eats lunch at her desk, writes down every expense in a small notebook, and never joins the Friday night crowd. At first, David thinks she's boring, maybe even stingy. But over time, he starts to notice small things. When the office printer breaks, she calmly orders a replacement part with her own card. When others complain about rent hikes, she just nods, unbothered. And when the team jokes about waiting for payday, Ellie just smiles and keeps typing. She has the same salary as David. But something about her feels different. One late afternoon, they end up walking out of the office together. The sun is setting behind glass towers, painting the streets gold. David, feeling friendly, asks, "Hey Ellie, what do you even do on weekends? You never come out with us." She glances at him, thoughtful. "I study," she says, "and sometimes I invest." David laughs. "Invest in what, crypto?" "No," she says softly, with a small smile. "In companies, stocks, the boring kind." He looks at her amused. "You mean like the Wall Street thing?" She nods. "Exactly that, just smaller." It sounds foreign to him, a world for people with suits, connections, and too much money. Not for someone like him, who still remembers the taste of instant noodles at the end of the month. That night, while scrolling through his phone, David looks up how to buy stocks. The screen floods with graphs, numbers, and complicated words. He shakes his head and swipes away. Not for me, he thinks. Maybe next time. Weeks pass. David gets another paycheck, spends again. A pattern begins, silent but powerful. Monday, relief. Wednesday, satisfaction. Friday, temptation. Sunday, regret. The feeling of "I deserve this" becomes a ritual, one that feels good for a moment and painful by the end of every month. But no one ever told him otherwise. Everyone around him seems to live the same way, chasing the next payday, like a finish line that never arrives. Meanwhile, Ellie makes her first investment. $200. Her hands tremble a little as she presses buy. It's not much, but it's hers. And while David scrolls through online stores late at night, Ellie reads about compounding returns and dividends. She doesn't understand everything yet, but she feels something that David hasn't felt in a long time. Control. There's a scene the kind you might see in a movie. It's payday again. David is at a rooftop bar, laughing too loudly, surrounded by flashing lights and music that drowns out thought. Ellie is at home, sipping tea, her laptop open to a slow-loading chart. Two lives, two paths, both young, both hopeful, but headed in entirely different directions. The camera would cut between them the sound of clinking glasses, blending into the soft ticking of her clock. His night burns bright and loud. Hers glows steady and quiet, and somewhere between those lights and silences, the story of wealth begins to split. Not between the rich and the poor, but between two mindsets. If this were the opening scene of a film, it wouldn't end with fireworks or money raining down. It would end with two people closing their eyes, one exhausted from spending, the other dreaming of growth. Because the truth is, every story about money begins the same way, with a paycheck. But it's what happens after that, the choices, the emotions, the mindset, that decides who stays broke and who builds freedom. Every month begins the same way. The first few days after payday feel like sunlight. David walks taller, smiles wider, and tells himself this time he'll be smarter. He opens his budgeting app, makes neat little plans, groceries, rent, savings. Then a notification buzzes, flash sale, 30% off electronics. And like a moth to the flame, he clicks. One purchase becomes two. A few clicks, a few taps, and suddenly the clean lines of his budget blur into chaos. The cycle begins again, quiet, predictable, invisible. By the third week of every month, the brightness fades. He checks his balance, sighs, tells himself next month will be better. It never is. Because this isn't just a habit, it's a pattern. The world around him feeds that pattern. Every ad whispers, "You deserve it." Every friend says, "What's the point of working if you can't enjoy it?" And deep down, David agrees. He grew up hearing that money was meant to be spent, that saving was for old people, and investing was for those who already had plenty. But what no one told him is that spending to feel rich only makes you feel broke in disguise. Meanwhile, across town, Ellie sits in her small apartment, a quiet space filled with second-hand furniture, soft yellow light, and a shelf of finance books she borrowed from the library. She's not rich, not even close, but she's beginning to understand something David doesn't. That money has two languages, spending and investing, and most people never learn the second one. She still remembers the first time she hit buy on that small stock purchase. Her heart had raced as if she'd done something dangerous. But when the number on her app ticked slightly upward, not by much, just a few cents, she felt a strange mix of pride and wonder. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "Today, I bought a tiny piece of something bigger than myself." At the office, nothing seems to change. David still jokes with everyone, still orders takeout for lunch, still pays for the occasional round of drinks. Ellie still eats her homemade sandwiches and keeps her receipts neatly folded in her wallet. But beneath the surface, their paths are diverging quietly, invisibly, like two lines that start close but drift apart over time. One afternoon, as they both wait for the elevator, David glances at Ellie's phone screen. A chart glows faintly, green lines, and numbers he doesn't understand. "You still doing that investing thing?" he asks. "Yeah," she replies. "A little every month. You actually make money from that?" "Sometimes," she says, "but that's not the point. Then what is? Learning how to stop depending on the next paycheck." He laughs it off, but her words linger. That night, he lies awake, staring at the ceiling. The room is dark except for the faint glow of his TV, muted on a rerun. He thinks about Ellie's calm face, about how she never seems stressed when money runs low. He remembers the fear that tightens in his chest every time his bank balance dips below $100. It's not the lack of money that hurts, it's the dependence on it. A few weeks later, something small but telling happens. David's credit card bill arrives. The minimum payment looks harmless enough, $45. He pays it, feeling responsible. But what he doesn't notice is the interest quietly eating away at his future. Every month his past choices compound against him, while Ellie's choices compound for her. Two kinds of compounding. One builds freedom, the other builds debt. And most people never realize which one they're serving. Meanwhile, Ellie is having her own moment of discovery. She's reading about Warren Buffett, how he bought his first stock at age 11 and never stopped learning. She underlines a sentence: "The best investment you can make is in yourself." She looks around her apartment, simple, quiet, peaceful, and smiles. For the first time she feels a sense of direction. It's not about greed, it's about independence, the quiet kind that doesn't need to show off. The story could have ended here, with one person slowly building wealth and another drifting deeper into debt, if not for what happens next. Because life, in its own strange way, always tests us. It doesn't ask if we're ready. It just comes. One Friday morning, the office is unusually tense. Whispers float through the air, layoffs. David scrolls through his email, heart pounding. Then he sees it. Mandatory HR meeting 3 p.m. His throat tightens. For the first time, the words next paycheck don't bring comfort. They bring panic. Ellie gets the same email, but she's calm. She's been preparing not just financially, but mentally. Whatever happens, she'll be okay. The invisible pattern, the one built on fear, spending and denial, is about to break wide open. For David, this moment isn't just about losing a job. It's about facing the truth he's been running from, that he's been spending his way through the illusion of security. And for Ellie, it's about proving that her quiet, disciplined path wasn't just theory, it was survival. By sunset, their two worlds, one built on consumption, one on compounding, will collide. And that's where the real story begins, when comfort disappears and character steps in. The email comes at 3:02 p.m. Dear David, we regret to inform you that due to company restructuring, your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. Just like that. A few cold sentences, no explanation, no second chances. He stares at the screen, not moving. The laughter of his co-workers feels distant, muffled, like it's coming through water. He scrolls up and down, hoping he's misread it, that there's some hidden clause, some mistake. But there isn't. The job is gone. The paycheck is gone. And for the first time, David realizes he's been living paycheck to paycheck, literally. He packs his things into a cardboard box, a coffee mug, some photos, a plant that's already dying. When he steps outside, the sky is grey. It feels like the whole city knows. His phone buzzes with another notification. Credit card payment due tomorrow. He swipes it away, too ashamed to look. That night, David sits alone in his apartment. The room is filled with all the things he bought to feel successful. The big TV, the designer shoes, the gadgets he never really used. He looks around and realizes none of it can help him now. He opens his bank app, $184 left. His stomach tightens. He opens Instagram instead, hoping to distract himself, but all he sees are photos of people smiling, spending, living. It feels like the whole world is still moving, and he's been left behind. A week passes. Then 2. Bills pile up. Calls from the bank start coming in. At first he ignores them. Then he begins to feel something worse than fear-shame. The kind that settles deep, whispering, "You failed." Meanwhile, Ellie faces the same layoff. Same email, same sentence, but her reaction is different. She closes her laptop, takes a slow breath, and makes tea. No panic, no tears, just quiet calculation. She opens her spreadsheet. Savings, 6 months of expenses. Investments enough to stay afloat if needed. It's not wealth, but it's stability. She spends the weekend updating her resume, checking job boards, and even enjoys a walk in the park. Because when you've built a cushion, you can still breathe even when the ground shakes. On the 3rd week, David calls her. His voice trembles a little. "Hey, I don't mean to bother you, but how are you holding up?" "I'm okay," she says. "I've been applying to a few places." "You?" There's a long pause. "Not great," he admits. "I thought I had time to figure things out." "Guess I didn't." She's quiet for a moment. "Do you want to grab coffee?" He almost says no. Pride burns in his chest, but then he whispers, Yeah, I'd like that." They meet at a small cafe near the office they no longer belong to. It's raining, and the sound against the window feels like background music for a confession. David looks at her calm, collected, composed, and blurts out, "How do you do it? How are you not freaking out?" Ellie stirs her coffee slowly. "Because I didn't build my life around my job," she says. "Then what did you build it around?" Freedom. The word hits him like thunder. She takes out her notebook, the same one he's seen her write in for years. It's filled with scribbles, charts and plans. "This is what I've been doing," she says. "Every month, I pay myself first. 10% goes into investments before I touch anything else. 10%, that's it. It's not about the amount, it's about the habit. You start small, but it grows." David frowns. "I always thought investing was for people who already had money." Ellie shakes her head. "That's the lie they sell us. The truth is, people have money because they invest." For a moment, neither of them speaks. Outside, cars splash through puddles. Inside, David feels something he hasn't felt in weeks, possibility. That night, back in his apartment, he pulls open a drawer and finds his last pay stub. He studies it like a document from another life. He opens his laptop, Googles how to start investing with no money. The results are overwhelming. He scrolls past jargon and complex graphs until one phrase catches his eye. Start where you are, use what you have. It's simple, human, possible. He writes it down on a sticky note and puts it on his wall. A small act, but it feels like defiance, a refusal to stay the same. In the days that follow, David begins to change, not dramatically, not instantly, but slowly. He cancels subscriptions, sells an old watch, stops eating out. Each small choice feels like reclaiming a little piece of control, but the shame doesn't vanish overnight. Every time he logs into his bank account, it stares back at him like a mirror of his old self, careless, impulsive, blind. Still, he keeps going. Because now he understands what Ellie meant by freedom. It's not about having everything. It's about not needing to chase everything. Months pass. David still hasn't found a new job, but he's surviving. Not thriving, not yet, but learning. Ellie, meanwhile, lands a position at a smaller firm. Less pay, but more peace. And when she gets her first check, she does the same thing she's always done: invests first, spends later. In the quiet distance between their two lives, something profound is unfolding. David, once the spender, is beginning to see money not as fuel for pleasure, but as a tool for stability. And Ellie, once the quiet saver, is beginning to see the power of sharing what she knows. The storm has stripped them both bare, but sometimes losing everything is how you finally see what matters. It starts with coffee, a cheap one, $2.15, but it feels like the most important purchase David's made in months. He sits by the window of that same small cafe where he and Ellie last talked. It's early morning. The streets are quiet. The sunlight, pale and clean, spills across his table. He opens a notebook blank. Except for the first words he's written on the cover. Start over. Later that day, he calls Ellie again. "You said I could start small," he tells her. "Teach me how." "All right," she says. "Bring your notebook. No excuses." They meet every Sunday after that, sometimes in cafes, sometimes at the park. No fancy spreadsheets, no complicated jargon, just two people, one trying to understand, the other trying to guide. She explains the basics: budgeting, saving, compounding interest. But what she really teaches him is mindset. Most people think wealth is about money, she says. It's really about behavior. Behavior? Yeah. Spending is emotional. Investing is intentional. One feeds your impulses, the other feeds your future. At first, David struggles. He sets a goal: save 10% of everything he earns from side jobs. But temptation whispers constantly. A friend invites him out for drinks. "Just one night, man." An ad flashes across his phone. Limited time deal. His brain fights itself. I deserve this versus I need this to change. Every small victory feels hard won. Every slip feels like failure, but he keeps trying. One night, Ellie gives him a challenge. "Write down every purchase you make for the next 30 days, she says. "Every single one. Every single one. Don't judge it, just write it." By week 2, his notebook is full of small entries that tell a painful story. $5 bottled coffee, $14 lunch, $3.99 app. 20 manlos Uber. Each line is a quiet confession, a history of impulses, not needs. And as he stares at the pages, something in him shifts. He begins to see patterns like footprints leading to nowhere. Each dollar he spent was really buying a feeling. Comfort, validation, distraction. He whispers to himself, almost in disbelief, I've been trading peace of mind for 5-minute highs. Weeks turn into months. The savings grow slowly, but steadily. $200, then $500, then $1,000. When he buys his first index fund, his hands tremble, just like Ellie's had, years before. He watches the screen as the order processes. You've successfully purchased 3 shares of the S&P 500 index fund. It's not much, but it's something real. That night, David doesn't go out. He stays home, makes cheap pasta, and writes in his notebook again. For the first time, I feel like I own something that can grow even while I sleep. He smiles, then underlines the next line twice. Freedom isn't bought. It's built. Meanwhile, Ellie notices a change in him. His posture, his voice, the way he talks about the future. There's less noise, more focus. She watches him explain to another co-worker how compounding works using simple words, a metaphor about planting seeds. And she realizes something quietly beautiful. The student is becoming a teacher, but growth is never linear. One day, David's old friends call him. They've booked a weekend trip, beach, music, luxury hotel. Come on, man. You've been working so hard. You deserve this. He hesitates. The old words again. You deserve it. They echo in his mind like a curse. For a brief second, the old version of him resurfaces, impulsive, restless, craving that temporary high. He almost says yes, but then he thinks about his notebook, his small investments, the calm he's begun to feel every morning. He exhales. I can't, guys, he says. I'm saving for something different. What, retirement? One of them laughs. No, David says quietly. For freedom. They don't get it. They change the subject, and that's okay, because for the first time, he doesn't need their validation. That night, he tells Ellie about it. It's weird, he says. Saying no used to feel like losing out. Now it feels like taking control. She smiles. That's because you're not saying no to fun, she says. You're saying yes to your future. He nods, slowly understanding. It's not about deprivation, it's about direction. Months pass and the discipline starts to stick. He builds a small emergency fund. He automates his savings. He reads more, learns more, asks better questions. He's still not rich, but he's no longer scared. The panic that once lived in his chest has been replaced by quiet confidence, and that feeling, he realizes, is the real wealth Ellie was talking about all along. One evening, they walk home together. The sun is setting, the air crisp with the smell of spring. You ever regret not spending more when you were younger? He asks. Ellie thinks for a moment. Sometimes, she admits, but every time I check my investments, I realize I didn't really miss out. I just delayed the joy. Delayed the joy, he repeats. I like that. They smile. Two people walking in silence, no longer student and teacher, but equals on the same path. In the reflection of the cafe window they pass, David catches a glimpse of himself older, calmer, and somehow lighter. Not because life got easier, but because he stopped making it harder. He realizes the truth he wishes he'd known years ago, that the first step toward freedom isn't earning more, it's learning to need less. And with that realization, his story shifts. He's no longer running from the storm. He's learning how to walk through it and toward the sun. Years pass quietly, the kind of years that don't make headlines, but change a life in secret. The city doesn't notice. The world keeps spinning, but David does. He's no longer chasing weekends or sales. He's chasing consistency. Every month, a small deposit moves automatically from his checking account into his investments, like clockwork, silent and steady. At first it felt meaningless. The numbers barely moved. But over time, something beautiful began to happen. They started to grow. One morning, David checks his portfolio and sees that the line has risen. Not dramatically, not overnight, but undeniably upward. He stares at the chart smiling. It's not pride exactly, it's peace. It's working, he whispers. Finally. But deep down, he knows the truth. It's not the money that's growing, it's him. Meanwhile, Ellie's life has changed too. Her small investments, made years ago, have blossomed into something solid. Not a fortune, not yachts and mansions, but stability, freedom, options. She lives in a modest home now, one she owns outright. She teaches free financial literacy workshops, on weekends, not because she has to, but because she wants others to feel what she once felt that night. She pressed buy for the first time. One of her favourite lines to repeat is, "Every dollar you invest is a seed. You won't see it grow tomorrow, but give it time, and one day you'll sit under its shade." David often helps her at those workshops. He doesn't see himself as an expert, just someone who learned the hard way. He tells his story with honesty, laughter, and a bit of humility. "I used to think freedom was about spending without worry," he tells the crowd. "Now I know freedom is not having to worry when you spend." The audience always nods. Some even tear up, because deep down they recognize that story in themselves. Life doesn't stop testing them though. There's a market crash one year. Stocks fall, headlines scream, panic spreads. David watches his portfolio dip for the first time. Old fears resurface. His hands hover over the sell button. Then he remembers Ellie's voice. "You don't lose when the market goes down. You lose when you panic." So he doesn't sell. He waits. Months later, the line starts to rise again. Slowly, patiently, like spring after winter. And that's when he truly understands the lesson that investing isn't about timing the market. It's about trusting time itself. In one quiet moment, sitting in his small apartment, he writes in his notebook again, "I used to live for instant gratification. Now I live for compound satisfaction." He underlines it, smiling. Years of small habits have changed him from the inside out. He reads before bed instead of scrolling. He cooks instead of ordering out. He walks instead of driving short distances. Each small act feels like another deposit into a life that compounds in more ways than one. Money grows, confidence grows, patience grows. The man who once lived for the next paycheck now lives for the next opportunity to learn. Ellie and David meet often old friends, bound by a shared journey. Sometimes they talk about investments, sometimes about life. One evening, they sit by the waterfront. The city lights shimmer on the water like 1,000 tiny candles. "Do you ever miss the chaos?" David asks. Ellie laughs. "You mean the nights we thought happiness could be bought?" "Yeah," he smiles. "Those ones sometimes," she admits. "But that version of happiness was borrowed. This one's earned." He nods. He understands. The conversation drifts toward time, how fast it moves, how quietly it shapes everything. "You know," Ellie says, "money and time are the same. If you waste them, they disappear. If you respect them, they multiply." David sits with that thought. He realizes that's the real secret, not stocks or markets or interest rates, but the relationship between patience and purpose. A few months later, David gets a job offer. A good one. Better than the job he lost years ago. But this time, he feels no rush of euphoria. He still celebrates, calls Ellie, takes her out for dinner, but the celebration is grounded, grateful. No impulsive spending spree, no new gadgets, just joy, quiet and deep. Because now he knows something most people never learn. Money doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've become. Years turn into a decade. The world changes, new technology, new crises, new distractions, but the fundamentals remain the same. David's portfolio grows, his anxiety shrinks, and his perspective widens. He mentors younger co-workers, not with numbers, but with stories. Stories of fear and failure, of the night he realized his closet was full, but his future was empty. Stories of the first time he said no, and found freedom in restraint. And every time someone asks him, "What's your biggest investment win?" he smiles and says, "Changing my mindset." There's a quiet montage that would play here if this were a film. David watering a small plant on his windowsill. It's taller now. Ellie leading a seminar, her voice calm and confident. A shot of an old receipt David keeps taped in his notebook, a reminder of his turning point. Time passes, but their discipline stays, and if you listen closely, you can hear it, the rhythm of growth, steady and patient, whispering the truth that changed both their lives. The poor spend money to feel rich. The rich invest money to stay free. It's a calm Sunday morning years later. The same cafe, the same corner table by the window. David sits with a cup of black coffee, watching the city wake up. The world hasn't changed much, traffic still hums, people still rush, but he has. He's older now, not rich in the way magazines define it, but rich in the way that matters. No debt, no panic, no sleepless nights over bills. His phone buzzes a notification from his investment app. He smiles. He doesn't even need to open it anymore. The number goes up and down, but his peace stays still. A familiar voice breaks his thoughts. "You're early?" It's Ellie. Same calm eyes, same simple clothes, same air of quiet purpose. She sets down her tea, takes a seat, and smiles. "Old habits," David says. "I guess I still like watching the world before it gets noisy." "That's how I know you've really changed," she laughs. They talk for hours about work, life, the books they've read. Ellie mentions she's planning to take a year off travel, volunteer, maybe start a small fund for financial education in low-income schools. David nods. "You built that freedom," he says. "We both did," she replies. "In our own ways." At one point, a young man walks in mid-20s wearing a suit that's too expensive for his confidence. He hesitates, then approaches their table. "Sorry," he says, nervous smile. "Are you David? From the seminar last month?" "Yeah," David nods. "That's me. I just wanted to say your story really hit me. I got my first paycheck last week, and I didn't spend it all." David chuckles. "That's a better start than I had." Ellie grins. "Welcome to the long game." The young man thanks them and leaves his shoulders lighter, his eyes bright. As the door closes, David sits in silence for a moment. He feels something warm, the kind of quiet pride that doesn't need applause. "You ever think about how far we've come?" he asks softly. "Every day," Ellie says. "Not in dollars, in peace." They sip their drinks in comfortable silence. Outside, people rush past, some laughing, some frowning, some scrolling through their phones, lost in the noise of more. And inside, two people sit still, content, steady, free. Years ago, David thought wealth meant owning things. Now he knows it means owning time. He works because he wants to, not because he has to. He spends without guilt, saves without fear, and invests without obsession. He's learned that money is neither good nor evil. It's a mirror. It reflects your discipline, your fears, your dreams. As they stand to leave, Ellie hands him a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" "Something I wrote years ago," she says. "Found it in an old notebook." He unfolds it. It's faded, handwritten in blue ink. "Today, I bought a tiny piece of something bigger than myself." David smiles. He remembers those words. "The first seed." "I guess you did," he says. "And now look at the forest." They laugh. Outside, the sun is high now, painting the streets gold the same way it did on the day David got his first paycheck. Back then, he thought he was free. Now he is. But not because of what he owns, because of what he's learned. Freedom isn't the absence of limits. It's the ability to choose your limits on purpose. He looks around people rushing to brunch, checking their phones, chasing moments. And for a brief second he sees his younger self among them, the boy with the new phone. The reckless grin, the heart full of impulse. He doesn't feel pity. He feels gratitude. Because without that boy, this man would never have been born. Later that evening, David sits at his desk, the same old notebook open in front of him. He writes one last entry. It started with a paycheck. It became a pattern, then a storm, then a lesson, and finally a mindset. He pauses, taps his pen, then adds, "Wealth isn't how much you earn. It's how long your money can protect your peace." He closes the notebook and leans back, exhaling slowly. Through the window, the city glows alive, restless, unaware. And David smiles, knowing that somewhere out there, another version of himself is about to get a first paycheck. Another story is beginning. Maybe it'll start with the same mistake. Maybe it'll end with the same realization. That's how change happens. One paycheck, one mindset, one quiet awakening at a time. Final line, closing echo. This story began with a paycheck and ended with freedom.